If you're one of our long-term customers, you may remember our original pop-up tent setup, and then our smaller apple shed, which has since been converted to our apple museum when we moved up to our current market. But did you know our orchard is actually over 100 years older than even our earliest days here in Palmyra? Fruit Hill really started way back in the late 1800s when James Thwaite came over from England. He and his family traveled around the East Coast for a while until they settled in Winchester, Virginia in 1876. His son, my great-great-great-grandfather John Thwaite, planted about 500 fruit trees in 1879. These trees were so successful that he planted another 700 trees the following season. He continued to add a few hundred trees each year until he filled a few hundred acres with apple trees. John Thwaite was one of the first pioneers of the fruit storage business model, which means he was one of the first folks to come up with ways to store large quantities of apples to sell later in the season and to places across the globe. Fruit Hill was officially incorporated in 1929. Fruit Hill Orchard continued for generations, growing into thousands of acres of orchard. 2 generations later, Robert Solenberger, my grandfather, decided to show up to my parents' home in Palmyra with what he called a few apple trees in the spring of 2000. He actually showed up with about 900. We started with the original 900 trees, and we added about 400 trees between 2000 and 2005. And then we planted an additional 600 apple trees and 400 peach trees in 2006. We're continuing to grow too. We planted about 500 apple trees this year just 1 mile down the road from our current market in Palmyra, and we plan to plant 1,000 more in the spring of 2024. Since the initial planting of trees here in Palmyra, a large portion of the orchards up in Winchester that have been in operation since the late 1800s were passed on to my mom, Barbara. Some of our pre-picked fruit comes from her orchards in Winchester to help us meet the demand down here. Barbara's sister Catherine and my cousin Emily also own and operate a farmer's market located on the very same piece of property as John Thwaite's original cold storage building. So if you're ever passing through Winchester, be sure to stop by the Homestead Farm. So even though some of your earliest memories may be of these young smiling faces here in Palmyra, Fruit Hill is actually much, much, much older than that. We always have been a family-owned and operated farm, and with my husband David and I stepping up to take on more and more responsibilities for my parents, Barbara and Terry, we're planning on keeping it all in the family for generations to come. We hope to see you soon.